Welcome back to In-Depth Literature, everybody's favorite place on the internet. Today we're going to be covering Bernhard Schlink's The Reader. Some of you guys may have come across the 2018 film with Kate Winslet. And I will say when you start to begin reading The Reader, you're going to sort of loosely have, by default, if you've seen the film or some of the promos, you'll have Kate Winslet sort of in the background of your mind as the likeness for this protagonist, or this co-protagonist, I should say. Her name is Hannah Schmidt. The main protagonist is named Michael Berg. But I will say that as you get throughout the novel and you sort of find your bearings, you get used to Bernhard Schlink's writing style, you'll sort of really start to imagine your own version of these characters, which is really cool. So that was just a little disclaimer just in the beginning. Anytime you see a film, so dear viewer, that you may be asking, what is The Reader all about? And basically it's a Holocaust novel, first and foremost, but it serves as an allegory for the Holocaust, but also for this larger theme of being complicit and also being illiterate, and what those two actions can cost humanity by allowing ignorance, by allowing people to become complicit, and basically turning a blind eye to atrocities. Now, I'll try to keep this video as spoiler-free as possible. We're going to talk more about the themes, more about the characters, and as usual, my analyses are not strictly plot-driven, so I will try not to give too many spoilers, but they'll definitely come up. You should probably watch the movie before you even watch this video, just so you have a little bit more of an idea of what it's all about, or maybe you can just watch this video and then read the book. I'm not going to give away every single thing, but this book is all-encompassing. It's rather profound, it's rather dense, but it's actually easy to read. It's very entertaining, it's very erotic, and the book, speaking of eroticism, that's a good place to start. We will talk about the beginning of the book, where I have my annotation here. It says, narrator goes to visit Frau Schmidt. So basically this protagonist, Michael Berg, is ill. I forgot what disease he has, but he's taken ill, and he is walking down the street coming back from school, or something. He's been sort of bedridden, and he was out and about doing something that he probably shouldn't have been doing, and he starts to feel ill, and he starts vomiting in the street, where Frau Schmidt, who we come to know later as Hannah Schmidt, happens to see him, and she sort of takes him under her wing, right? She sort of gives him fresh water, helps him get a nice fresh change of clothes, and that was pretty much that was their first and final encounter, up until when he is more physically able. His mother sort of remembers, hey, you should go talk to that lady that helped you on the street that day. And he, musters up the confidence to go and see this older woman that sort of rescued him on that fateful day, right? And they begin a relationship, and she starts to seduce him. And we have these wonderfully erotic scenes where this teenage man, I think he's like maybe 15, 16, he's rather young, maybe more like 14. He develops this relationship with like this 40-year-old woman. And reading this as a man, I think it's a little bit different than if, maybe for the female readers. Obviously, in a nutshell, this is a predatory relationship, but it's also kind of erotic. And if you're a man, if you're a young man, we have romantic/erotic fantasies or desires for older women. Yes, it's a thing, but I'm not excusing the predatory nature of this relationship, but it's also a beautiful relationship at the same time. So it's not, it is predatory, it is immoral. It sort of serves as, we'll get to it later, but it's an immoral relationship, but you also sort of feel for Hannah Schmidt, at least I did, and we feel for Michael Berg, obviously, because he's head over heels for this older woman that probably doesn't really care about him, but she's sort of using him as a vessel, not only for her illiteracy, which comes up later in the novel, but she's also using him for physical and sexual gratification. So just these beautiful descriptions of how he's describing how he was sort of falling in love with her. She also ironed her underwear, and I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help looking. She was wearing a sleeveless smock, blue with little pale red flowers on it. Her shoulder-length, ash-blonde hair was fastened with a clip at the back of her neck. Her bare arms were pale. her gestures of lifting the iron, using it, setting it down again, and then folding and putting away the laundry were an exercise in slow concentration. So we get this idea that Hannah Schmitz is a very strong female character. At least that's the way she's portrayed physically and sort of on an emotional exterior. She's like this very strong woman. She's taking care of the house. She's taking care of the young Michael Berg. But later we come to realize that this character, Hannah Schmitz, is not so strong after all, and she's keeping skeletons in her closet. So the relationship kind of develops, and Hannah Schmitz is working as a streetcar operator, and most of this novel takes place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but I will say that it jumps back in time because obviously in the beginning, this Michael Berg character is very young when he meets Hannah Schmitz. And by the middle and the end of the novel, we start getting these flashbacks where Michael Berg is an older, mature man reflecting on his younger life with Frau Schmitz. And we also get some, monologues, these other introspective scenes about other characters, other members of his family. He falls in love with another woman later in life. On page 25, basically they start making love. It's very erotic, but it's tasteful. It's beautiful the way he writes these physical love-making scenes, but we get the idea that Michael Berg is just head over heels. He's also addicted to Hannah's body on a visceral, sensual, sexual level. He just cannot get enough of this woman, this older woman's body. He cannot get enough of her curves. He cannot get enough of her smell. Her sexual energy is sort of an all-consuming force to this young male character, and it's sort of used as a way to pacify him, to get him to keep coming back. But it's only a matter of time right before Hannah Schmitz starts to sort of unveil her true colors, and she sort of starts to become short-tempered, resentful, that he sort of has another life. She starts, sending him away, saying, okay, well, if you'd rather be with your friends and get the hell out of here. And we start to see the insecurities of Hannah Schmitz. It's sort of the skeletons in her closet that we mentioned really start to come out as this novel unfolds. He starts to read to this character, and for some reason she never wants to take a book off the shelf. She's very interested in literature, but she's only interested in it when he's around or when he is able to sort of co-facilitate the reading activity. And why is that she does not want to read books? Well, it comes up later in the novel. So he sort of starts to co-facilitate Hannah's illiteracy, right? But he doesn't really realize she's illiterate. He's just sort of doing it as a loving / erotic, fun, foreplay type thing. They sort of make love and then he reads to her, or vice versa. And he's fairly well read. This Michael Berg character is very well read at a young age, which is kind of unusual, but hey, we'll go with it. And Hannah is interested in the classic writers. She's interested in these progressive ideas, but it's sort of ironic, or not even ironic, but it's just sort of unsettling because deep down inside or beneath the veil of her sort of curious exterior, she's not only illiterate, but she's also a sociopathic character, because we start to get to these passages where she sort of starts to grow, like we said, very resentful of Michael, and then she actually hits him over the mouth with like a leather strap. And she's also a sort of a sociopathic entity, not only because of the predatory nature of this relationship that she's using Michael Berg for, but she also has a very, very checkered background. And further throughout the novel, he actually goes to visit her on the streetcar, and then once all the passengers are gone, he sort of starts to clam up, and she's in the front of the streetcar, right where she works, and there's another driver in a couple meters ahead in the next car, and he sort of looks at her, but he's too afraid to approach her in public because the relationship is like, obviously a secret. It's immoral, it's sinful. But she does not choose to acknowledge him. She feels shunned by him, and that's when really the shame and the regret and the embarrassment comes up in Hannah Schmitz, and we get the sense that, okay, maybe she does have somewhat of a conscience. Maybe she does feel a little bit bad about, taking advantage of this young man. And she scorns him, and then he confronts her about this exchange, and they sort of had this disagreement. But we had this beautiful passage where Hannah is very resentful and actually very hurt by Michael's actions of not acknowledging her that day in the streetcar. And it sort of functions as like a wake-up call that, yes, this relationship was doomed from the start. This relationship is predatory. You're having to live in secrecy. But it's just very compelling because Hannah Schmitz is not by any means a likable character, but we sympathize with her despite all of the atrocities and all of her shortcomings on an emotional and mental level. It says here, "Don't touch me," she said. She was holding the narrow leather belt that she wore around her dress. She took a step backwards and hit me across the face with it. My lips split and I tasted blood. It didn't hurt. I was horror-struck. She swung it again, but she didn't hit me. She let her arm fall, dropped the belt, and burst into tears. I had never seen her cry. Her face lost all its shape. She stood there looking at me through her tears. So again, another vulnerable, visceral scene of Hannah Schmitz sort of collapsing into this emotional infancy, despite how sociopathic and cruel this character can actually be. There's a side to Hannah Schmitz that we sympathize with, because not only because we sort of start to get the sense that something traumatic happened to her, but we also get the sense that obviously she's keeping something secret. We really start to assume that, yes, she must be illiterate, because why else would she want to constantly be read to by Michael Berg? So the relationship sort of starts to run its course, maybe on page 75 to 80. The romance is kind of over, but obviously we're getting these flashbacks where he goes back into sort of the more romantic periods of their life versus the more tense periods. But the relationship kind of fizzles out because Michael Berg is getting older. Hannah actually ends up taking off unexpectedly, right? And really what that is that her past has caught up with her. I don't want to tell you everything, but Michael Berg ends up he's taking a class in college. This is way after the fact, I think. He's getting his master's degree or something, or maybe his undergraduate, and he's taking some kind of a course, and he volunteers to go be part of the jury, or at least to maybe if he's not in the jury, he's like observing from the pews. And lo and behold, who does he see in court? Hannah Schmitz. And why is she there? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. It comes to fruition. It says here, the prosecutor or the judge is asking her, is it true that you joined the SS even though Siemens had offered you a job as a foreman? You guys are not familiar with World War II. The SS was sort of Hitler's paramilitary campaign that sort of generated into, the atrocities of the Holocaust. So this Hannah Schmitz character, without giving away too much, was working for Hitler's secretive agenda, right? And she ends up, I'm not sure if we disclosed this earlier, but she ends up working at a concentration camp. And that's where the whole novel sort of coalesces, or the whole novel comes together, because we realize that is one of the secrets that Hannah is keeping. She was a sociopathic, sadistic employee at a Holocaust facility, but she was also illiterate. She's been illiterate her entire life. But also, what's also sadistically eerie about this is that the same behavior that Michael would use to sort of pacify Hannah, reading to her, she actually used the same tactic on the victims that were at the Holocaust facility. She would have them read to her before they were sort of banished or done away with. So this whole act of Michael Berg reading to Hannah, it's kind of creepy in that sense, because she's been doing this. She's been sort of using people as a vessel for her illiteracy. So basically, Hannah's illiteracy is continued as a secret in the court proceedings. Hannah is willing to face life in prison versus being exposed for illiteracy. So it's pretty intense how deep her secret of illiteracy goes. Michael Berg suggests to us here that was also why she had refused a promotion at Siemens and become a guard. That was why she admitted to writing the report in order to escape a confrontation with an expert. And was that why she always chose the weak ones in the first place? So again, a very, very sadistic character, but sort of a tragic character in the sense that she is completely debilitated and controlled by her illiteracy. She's willing to go to prison for it, but also she was willing to kill people to keep her illiteracy a secret. Obviously, in terms of the Holocaust, in terms of World War II and Hitler and the concentration camps, obviously within that universe, yes, it's horribly tragic and immoral, but also on a personal level, what that does to Hannah is causes her to be basically unable to really function or have anything resembling a normal relationship. And not only was she sort of predatory in the concentration camps, obviously, but she becomes predatory towards Michael Berg and every other relationship that she has in order to keep her secret of illiteracy intact. She does not want to be exposed, and she will go the extra mile to deceive, to manipulate, and also to destroy in order to keep this a secret. And it sort of becomes Michael Berg towards the end of the novel is trying to come to terms with his feelings towards Hannah, but also his sort of existential analysis of the Holocaust itself, and how does he fit into this whole legacy? How does Hannah fit into the history? How could he possibly have been so naive, so deceived to love a woman that was so complicit, right, in the atrocities of the Holocaust, but also a woman that was so nonchalant in her willingness to deceive him? He feels like a fool. He feels taken advantage of, but the complacency that Hannah has is sort of a complacency for mankind itself, or for humanity itself. And I think Bernhard Schlink is sort of using that as a springboard, the fact that humanity at the time sort of turned a blind eye to what was really going on. You know, how did they not know that all these Jewish people were being persecuted in the Holocaust? You know, and it sort of functions as this allegory or this metaphor, right, for the illiteracy slash complacency of an entire society, an entire generation that allows cruelty to take place. And we get these beautiful retrospective analyses of how Michael Berg is trying to come to terms with this. He starts having nightmares about Hannah, and he's trying to sort of come to terms with the trauma of the Holocaust. And this book also serves its place in this genre. It's actually a German word. It's a really long German word that basically translates to, or it functions as, reconciliation of the past, or interpreting the past, or sort of forgiving the past, or yeah, you can look it up on the internet, but it's this whole genre, and this book sort of fits into that. It's this type of Holocaust literature that sort of forces the reader and forces the author and the scholar to really confront the complacency of the past, right? Or sort of the moralization of the past that has sort of long been forgotten, but that was at the time truly horrific. And how do we, living in sort of a modern context, how do we look back on the past and not romanticize it, right? That's kind of what Bernhard Schlink is doing. And actually, he has some critics because, you know, he sort of created a character that was meant to be a character that we sympathize with. So a lot of his critics were saying, well, why did he create a character that was involved in the Holocaust that we sympathize with? Why did he make erotic, use out of the Holocaust, so on and so forth? But I don't really see it that way. I see it as he created vulnerable, characters that are human. They're likable and they're real because they're imperfect. They're not, this is not a strong female character or a girl boss or something like we would see. But these are not particularly likable characters by any means, but they're so flawed. They're so viscerally realistic and contradictory, that we just completely are invested in their story, whether or not they're sadistic or evil or perpetrators or what. Now, basically, going back to the Holocaust, there's my annotation here says morality of the Holocaust as it trickles down from the main purpose to a routine indifference. And basically what I meant by that was Bernhard Schlink is basically demonstrating for us that yes, on a visceral level, on a existential level, yes, the Holocaust was completely evil. It was completely unavoidable. But as it trickles down from the main perpetrators, from the main orchestrators, from the main devils that are committing this atrocity, right? As it trickles down from its overlords, all the way down to somebody as insignificant but extremely significant at the same time as Hannah Schmidt, what are we to make of her role in the atrocities? Was she, just doing her job, right? And that's what this sort of book sort of calls into question. Was she just doing her job, or was she just as bad as Hitler himself? And you're sort of forced to confront those ideas, of any war or any social atrocity. Are people sort of just being used as pawns and as puppets for the evil overlords, or are people's complicities and nonchalant illiteracies, perhaps their shortcomings? And this kind of explains what I was referencing before, how the evil from the top of the system sort of trickles down, and what are we to make of those sort of routine workers that are just doing their job, right? But executioners don't hate the people they execute, and they execute them all the same. So very controversial, divisive, maybe perhaps culturally divisive and sort of historically divisive take on the Holocaust, because it explores, there's no stone within Holocaust history that's really not unturned here, at least in terms of its confronting those issues of morality. I've never really read anything quite like it. And Michael Berg's character, he's struggling to condemn Hannah, not only because he still has feelings for this woman, but he is struggling to face her role in the Holocaust. And was she completely helpless? Was she, just doing her job? Or did she know damn well what she was doing? So just these beautiful, heart-wrenching, introspective monologues of how this character, Michael Berg, is going to deal with his relationship with Hannah Berg now. And basically what happens now is that not only on a sort of an emotional level is he completely traumatized and sort of stunted, but obviously on a physical level, every woman that he interacts with, he fantasizes about Hannah, or he feels Hannah's energy. He is sort of recalling Hannah, and he can't really have a regular relationship because this woman took advantage of him. And also not only that, but he's sort of burdened by the existential feelings that seeing her in the courtroom and the trial of her, trying to hide her illiteracy caused on him. And it sort of dawns on him. I'm not sure if this was a wake-up call for any of the other characters, if any of the lawyers or the judges of the court realized this, but it dawns on Michael Berg that Hannah was illiterate. I think he's maybe one of the only ones that really put two and two together. But he feels compelled to reach out to her for some reason, despite everything that he's learned. And he basically starts to record poetry and novels and plays. He records them on a cassette tape and sends them to Hannah in prison. And that is the sort of what happens. That's the course of their relationship for the next, 18, 19, 20 years. And she grows old in prison, obviously. But Michael Berg feels obligated to sort of help educate Hannah despite all the atrocities, despite all the evil and the trauma that she's inflicted on this young man, as well as society as a whole. And towards the end of the novel, we also get these monologues from Michael that he sort of has this erotic, motherly, my annotation here says, latent sexual maternal tension or absence. I'll read a little excerpt here. Justina, a psychoanalyst, thought I needed to work through my relationship with my mother. Did it not strike me that my mother hardly appeared in my story at all? I think there is some latent traumatic sexual tension between Michael Berg and his mother that's never really completely unveiled, but we could kind of assume maybe this character was taken advantage of in some way, physically or emotionally, by his mother, perhaps neglected by his mother, if it wasn't outward, some type of physical / sexual abuse. We just don't know, and that's why this novel is so fascinating. These characters are so full of secrets, even though we get, 220 pages by the end of the novel. We're still asking questions. This novel sticks with you. It sort of disturbs you and sticks with you on a very visceral, emotional level. And it's unclear what the trajectory of Michael Berg's life is going to be now. He's obviously very traumatized. He's never going to be able to have a normal relationship. And by default of what Hannah did to him, that's what makes Hannah an unlikable character, but she's a fascinating character, and we also feel for her despite the fact she's a narcissistic, sociopathic murderer, right? / sexual predator, but it's just so fascinating. It just goes to show you, if we've got any writers out there or just lovers of literature, is that dislikable characters, or unlikable characters, I should say, those make for the best novels, and if you're writing characters, make them as flawed as possible, because that's what makes readers want to come back. That's what makes characters stick with people, is characters that are controversial, characters that are complex, characters that are completely unlikable in some cases, like Hannah Schmidt's in The Reader. So I will encourage you guys to read this wonderful historical tragedy. Obviously it's all encompassing. We can't cover everything in, a 40-minute video here, but please read The Reader and watch the film. You could really do either or. I would encourage you probably to read the book first, just so you don't have any preconceived notions of what everybody's supposed to look like or act like. But I will tell you that Kate Winslet did a marvelous job playing this character. And it's just, I think as a man, it's just sort of an enjoyable, erotic read, because it's about a young man having a relationship with an older woman. What young guy is not going to like that? But having said that, I do think there's some traumatic things that Bernhard Schlink is sort of getting at or hinting at, like that little passage about his mother, or Michael Berg's mother, some potentially latent abuse that took place with a maternal figure perhaps, or maybe it was just neglect. But obviously we have just the disturbing historical narrative / controversy of how to interpret the crimes of the Holocaust, how to come to terms and face the past, the traumas of the past, and what is our role in that? What is society's role? What is history's role? What is the future's sort of role in condemning, but also, humanizing the atrocities that took place? How do we interpret the cruelty done by the masterminds of a particular cultural crime? How does that manifest, like we said, as it trickles down from the evil masterminds all the way down to the bottom? Who's at fault? Is everybody at fault? Is just the powers that be at fault, as we like to say, or is everybody's indifference or everybody's complicitness, willingness to turn a blind eye, is that as bad of a crime as the actual crime itself? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys will be encouraged to read Bernhard Schlink's The Reader, and we'll see you all in the next literature analysis.